Right now I'm reading Franz Kafka, The Castle. As always, it's kind of confusing, just like everything Kafka wrote. So I decided to make a little 4-part series where I look at the contents and give like an analysis or whatever, my thoughts while reading. This is part 1. It's gonna be pages 1 to roughly 100, 102. We're gonna go through the first 6 chapters. There are 20 chapters in total, plus some parts that the author didn't decide to include in the book. This book is unfinished and wasn't supposed to see the light of day. But now it's here and we can talk about it, and I would like to talk about it, so let's get right into it. It's winter. Our main protagonist, K, who's a man in his 30s, comes to a village he's been ordered to work at as a surveyor. He has been ordered there by some castle official, and he sees the castle in the distance on a hill. But he's tired after a long journey and decides to enter the local inn. The inn is called To the Bridge. In there he meets the innkeeper, some simple-minded peasants, and a person that seems more aristocratic than the others. Kay doesn't bother with any of them, just asks if he can sleep in the corner because there are no rooms available, and lies down. But this sophisticated looking man immediately questions Kay and calls into the castle to see whether he's legitimately there and is allowed to be there. At first, the castle says that they didn't order a surveyor, but after Kay insists and really stands his ground, they finally accept that he's there and they say, yeah, we ordered one. And he even gains some confidence by this small battle that he won, and he orders that he is to be informed when his assistants arrive. The next day, Kay wants to go to the castle to work out the details of his duties. On the way there, he meets the teacher followed by the school children. But the teacher makes ominous statements like, "You don't like the castle, no stranger likes the castle," or "There is no big difference between the castle and the peasants." Kay thinks that a sophisticated person like the teacher would make a good future friend and asks if he can ever meet up with him. The teacher reacts rather neutral. After some more insisting on Kay's side, he finally gives him his address and then just leaves. While going towards the castle, Kay realizes that he doesn't really go towards the castle and that the road only alludes to the castle, but eventually always leads away from the castle, and the village seems to never end. Eventually he gets stuck in the snow. Seeing no other way out, he takes a snowball and throws it against the nearest window. An old peasant comes out and lends him a hand, gets him out of the snow and into his small shed. In the shed, Kay meets the old peasant, a younger blonde woman doing laundry in the corner, 2 big men taking a bath in the middle of the room, and a bunch of children. Additionally, there's one figure that stands out especially. In the back of the room, there is a small, lanky, pale and sickly looking woman breastfeeding a child. But it doesn't seem like an intimate moment the child and the mother have, because the mother is just staring at the ceiling. After Kay finally takes in this new situation and this new place where he can rest, the 2 men tell him that he has to leave immediately. Kay quickly turns around and asks the pale-looking woman what she's all about, and she says, "I'm a girl from the castle." Everyone gets like super crazy with him and he gets thrown out. Outside, Kay is passed by 2 young men who have very long legs that just glide over the snow. These 2 young men are greeted by the peasants from the house with the names Arthur and Jeremias. The door is closed, Arthur and Jeremias pass, and Kay is left alone again. After standing around for a couple of moments, the peasant 1 house over is so bothered by his mere existence that he takes out his sled and brings Kay back to the inn. So yeah, that's chapter 1 for you. That's the scene. We have this weird village. Everyone is kind of interested in Kay, and everyone knows that he's the surveyor or that a surveyor has come. For example, when Kay enters the house where the 2 men are bathing and with the pale looking woman, He comes in and somebody asks who he is, and then somebody else says, oh, it's just a surveyor, and then everyone just loses interest. After one chapter, Kay hasn't made any progress. We know what the scene is, we know what his mission is. He wants to go to the castle. It's hinted at that the castle is this indisputable source of power and authority. Kay's presence is acknowledged by the castle, but the peasants don't want to engage with him anyway. No one is like offensively rude to him, but they're not nice to him either. The castle itself seems more like an entity, but when Kay wants to talk about that with the locals, they don't really listen to him. They start to go into details and they explain the structure in castellans and all these officials that work there, but they never really explain why or what they do or what their position is in the whole hierarchy. Everything around the castle just seems like ominously important, despite it seeming to have concrete consequences for the lives of the peasants. The peasants themselves just seem beaten up and not interested in any interaction that goes beyond their day-to-day life. So we're back at the inn and Kay meets the two young lanky men called Arthur and Jeremias, and they introduce themselves as his assistants. Kay is super confused by this because he knows his assistants and he's been waiting for like specific people, but he has never seen Arthur and Jeremias. He's kind of so confused that he accepts it. But additionally, they didn't bring his instruments, which he needs to work. Furthermore, they confess that they don't know anything about being a surveyor. But honestly, they don't really seem to care either. Kay then discloses his plans of going to the castle, but his assistants insist that no one is ever going to the castle. Kay doesn't believe that that's the case and uses the phone at the inn to call into the castle, has a super confusing interaction with someone named Oswald who says he's never going to go to the castle, but because Kay doesn't want to lose his dignity and pride in front of everyone, he acts like he accepts it and just throws down the phone. But before Kay can think about what this phone call means, a messenger arrives for him. The messenger is called Barnabas and he'll be important from now on, but let's talk about the letter first. The letter is from Mr. Clum, principal of the 10th registry of the castle. The letter basically says that Kay is welcome here and that as he knows he's now in the service of the castle and that if he ever needs something he should talk to his superior who is the church warden, and that Mr. Clum will always try and find a way to support him if he has questions. Of course, Kay is happy about this because his presence is finally officially acknowledged and he has a person that he can try and contact. Barnabas, the messenger, also says that from now on he'll be the messenger between Mr. Clum and Kay. Kay really likes Barnabas. I don't really know why, he just seems more aristocratic than the peasants, I believe, and that's why Kay believes that he has found someone he can really connect with. Barnabas insists that he's just a messenger and everyone else kind of treats Barnabas like an outcast or doesn't really care about him. And when Barnabas tries to leave, Kay sees it as a chance to go to the castle because he believes that Barnabas comes from the castle. So he leaves his assistants behind and goes with Barnabas. But after some time going through the snow and the darkness, Barnabas finally confesses that he's going home and not into the castle. Barnabas doesn't really understand why Kay even wants to go to the castle, because for everyone in the village it's just matter of fact that they can't go to the castle. Kay is very bummed out about this and then ends up at Barnabas's home. And he realizes Barnabas is also just a peasant. After taking off his messenger uniform, he just looks like everyone else. At Barnabas's house we have his two sisters and his parents, and Kay just sits in the corner and is sad. At some point there is the idea that they should get fresh beer, and one of the sisters, Olga, decides to go to the nearest inn. When Kay hears this, he asks about the inn, and this inn is different from the Bridge Inn. because this is the inn where the officials stay. And Kay sees another chance to get in contact with the castle. So he goes with Olga to get some beer. At the inn, Kay immediately asks the innkeeper if he can stay the night. The innkeeper declines, but after Kay insists, he confesses that they only have one guest and that guest is Clum. Kay is so surprised by this that he doesn't take the chance to sleep there, even though the innkeeper waits for his reaction. But Kay doesn't seal the deal. Then Olga takes Kay into the bar of the inn. So in chapter 2 we get a bunch of progress. A couple of characters get introduced, the assistants, so Arthur and Jeremias, Barnabas the messenger, Barnabas' family with Olga. We get a new location, which is the officials' inn, but we also have the same themes that we got in chapter 1. No one wants to really help Kay. Everything he does, he has to initiate himself. No one seems to understand his train of thought. Everyone is following social rules that are not disclosed to Kay. The whole winter setting makes it hard for him. So everywhere he goes, for example with Barnabas and Olga, they have to carry him halfway because he's just not able to survive in the snow. At first glance, everything seems strict and everyone declines Kay's request, but when he insists on it, nobody's really able to stop him and is really unsure of themselves. But it's also the case that Kay lost as much as he gained, because he gets 2 new assistants, but they are worthless to him. They're just a hassle to him. He gets to know someone new, Barnabas, and feels like he's not alone anymore, but Barnabas thinks the same way as everyone else. He's just a little nicer and he's a peasant as well. Olga and Kay enter the bar at the officials' inn. In the bar we have the entourage of Clum sitting on barrels and drinking. Behind the bar we have a young blonde girl with eyes that radiate superiority. Her name is Frida. Frida and Olga know but dislike each other. Kay kind of just ignores this and starts talking to Frida, and Frida seems to know more than everyone else. After Kay realizes that Clum is sitting in the back room of the bar, he asks whether there's some way to see him, and Frida shows him her personal peephole where you can see into the back room without the back room noticing. And now the big moment, we get to see Clum. Clum is described as fat, of average height, starting to show signs of aging, and sporting a long mustache. He's sitting at the table, not moving an inch. After Kay has peeped long enough, Frida tells him that she's the mistress. She boasts this and she discloses that this is a social honor and that she has climbed in the social hierarchy by being Clum's mistress. Kay and Frida talk for a while, but the conversation is dominated by distrust and pride on both sides. And Kay kind of gets fed up with the whole thing and says, "Ooh, look out, I'm gonna steal you from Clum," and then asks Olga to leave. But in that moment, Frida whispers to him, "I want to talk to you in private." Kay says that he will only oblige if he gets to stay at the inn. She says, "Yeah, I can do that," and just starts ranting about this entourage of Clum and that they're peasants and that they're vulgar and that they're animals. And at the same time, the entourage of Clum starts dancing around Olga and it kind of almost seems erotic. They won't let Olga leave. Frida is so fed up with this that she takes a whip and casts them out the bar. She even says in Clum's name, just like Clum is God. Kay uses the chaos to hide beneath the bar counter. When Frida comes back in and the innkeeper asks her where Kay is because he deeply distrusts Kay, she just jokingly says, "Oh, maybe he's hiding under here," putting her foot on his chest and jokingly applying pressure. And when she does another joke and acts like she's looking for him under the bar counter, they kiss. So the innkeeper just doesn't want to deal with the whole situation anymore. He doesn't notice that Kay is there and he just leaves. Frida and Kay just spend the night together. So Frida just comes to him under the bar counter and then they just hug and cuddle and do all the stuff adults do when they like each other. The next morning, Kay and Frida wake up and Clum is calling for Frida. but she just hits against the door of the back room and shouts, "I'm with the surveyor." And then Clum just stops calling for her. Olga and the entourage enter, and Olga is shocked that Kay got entangled with Frida. One has to say, Olga is interested in Kay and she also dislikes Frida. Everyone just says that they now have to leave for the bridge inn. Frida just puts down her work. It's kind of a universal knowledge that she's not working there anymore after she defied Clum. The assistants also appear, so Kay, Frida and the assistants walk towards the bridge inn. Chapter 3 is our new high point of absurdity and Kay's struggle. We get to see Clum, but not directly. We have to look through a peephole. Then Frida gets introduced, who's one of the main characters from now on. Again, we have a quick and weird change of heart because she is super prideful and boasts that she's entangled with Clum, but then immediately falls for Kay, even though that wasn't his goal. Then we have the entourage of Clum, who are not peasants, but not aristocrats from the castle as well. They're almost like the dogs of Clum, kind of. The way they're described is very like vulgar and stupid. And what stood out to me was the lack of immediate consequences. Frida's actions are the most evident act of defiance we have up until now. Kay is kind of a nuisance to everyone, but he didn't really change anything or do something super bad. But Frida openly defies someone from the castle despite her saying that it's a big thing being connected to Clum, even as a mistress. But nothing happens. Olga is just kind of mad, a little mad. The entourage is just kind of a little mad and looks at her. And Clum doesn't do anything, he just stops calling for her. This absence of sanctions seems very calculated and stands in contrast with the vulgarity of the rest of the scene. On one hand, we have this silent judgment of Frida's actions, but on the other hand, we have this loud, messy, vulgar display of hedonism of the entourage and of Kay and Frida, obviously. You can also see this contrast in Kay himself. So he has this kind of intelligence and wit and tenacity when going after his goal of getting to the castle. But on the other hand, you have him just trying to find a friend, getting entangled with Frida, flirting with her and peeping through the hole like a little kid. Kay doesn't seem like he belongs, and that might be the reason why Frida fell for him. He's neither part of the peasants nor of the officials. And with her working for the officials, working for a peasant, so someone like the innkeeper, she's between both worlds as well, and that's maybe kind of why she felt connected to him. Kay and Frida passive-aggressively talking to each other might have been Kay's shot at flirty banter. It's not the best, but at least the characters get to know each other. Our little family of Kay, Frida and the assistants Arthur and Jeremias, they kind of just hang out in the maidservant's room. Kay is depressed and doesn't get up for 24 hours. Frida just plays with the assistants. The assistants are very childish and kind of like clownish, but Frida enjoys their presence. At some point, Kay finally gets up. Kay then tells the assistants to leave and engages in heavy petting with Frida. Kafka directly describes it as dogs digging for something because it's their instinct. Kay then gets up again and decides to meet the church warden to see whether he can help him, but he gets held up by the hostess, the keeper of the inn. A discussion between Kay and the hostess ensues. Kay promises that he plans on marrying Frida in the near future. His new plan now is to talk to Clum directly. His reason for this is that he kind of stole away Frida and that he wants to talk things out. Also, Clum wrote the letter to him and he's the first official he's ever seen, so he's the most concrete source that he has. The hostess then scolds him and says that he'll never be able to talk to Clem directly and that he'll never be able to visit the castle. She also emphasizes that Kay has robbed Frida of her exclusive standing in society, but that most likely Clem doesn't care. At some point, Kay just gets tired of the discussion because they're running in circles, takes the letter of Clem and his assistants and leaves for the church warden. So on the surface, in this chapter, not much happens, but we learn a lot about the politics and the code of conduct in the village. We have Kay, who stands between his thirst for action and his lack of knowledge regarding the customs in the village. His responsibility for Frida weighs on him, but he doesn't want to back off. The hostess, on the other side, seems to care about Frida because she used to work at the inn, and she's also worried about the way that things are supposed to go. The hostess makes a lot of absolute but contradicting statements. For example, at one point she says, Frida's situation has no connection to yours whatsoever. But at another moment she says, you have seduced our dearest little Frida, and now we sadly have to give her to you so you may wife her. The hostess also promises Kay that she'll give an explanation why he can't talk to Clem and why he can't do the things he wants to do, but then just proceeds to talk about her general knowledge of life. She also vaguely points out the inferiority of Barnabas's family without going into detail. But after spewing a flood of nonsense, she says something that perfectly encapsulates Kay's situation in the village. You are not from the castle, you are not from the village, you are nothing. The contradicting nature of this sentence in the given circumstances is what the book is about up until now, at least for me. So Kay doesn't belong and he's just a nuisance to everybody else. But despite that, he's not hindered from doing anything that he wants to do, at least not directly. He is the reason for social restructuring, like Frida leaving Clem, leaving her job at the officials' inn. And at the same time, he's not one step closer to engaging with officials or the castle despite its omnipresence. In this chapter, we have Kay talking to the church warden. The church warden is kind of like a mayor. He's an older gentleman who lays in bed having some kind of condition with his legs, I guess. He has a wife called Mitzi who does a lot of services for him and helps him. So Kay presents Clem's letter, and Kay comes in with a lot of ego and pride because he feels like the letter gives him some kind of power. The church warden then explains that the letter is only half official and that he doesn't understand the official language of the castle and the village, and that it's basically just an acknowledgement of the things that Kay has done in the past, for example, the calls to the castle, and that, yeah, he's now in service of the castle just like anyone else, and that Clem may be sad that he wants to help him, but in reality the officials never help anybody really, so that was just kind of a private message from Clem, not a document that he can use as evidence for anything. When Kay wants to debate this, the church warden just starts telling him a story about the whole surveyor topic in the village. Meanwhile, he lets his wife Mitzi and the assistants look for a piece of paper, a document. So the story goes somewhat like this. At one point, a registry or an office of the castle wrote to the church warden asking whether they need a surveyor and that they will call a surveyor. And then the church warden answered, no, we don't need a surveyor. Everyone's scared that they will lose their land and that a surveyor just makes everyone scared that their grounds will become smaller. And then he sends this letter back to the castle and it kind of gets mixed up and it doesn't get to Office 1, but it gets to Office 2 or Registry 2, but they don't know anything about Registry 1 and that they asked the village in the first place. And then the official there writes to the church warden and they take like 1 year just to figure out what this all is about. And then another peasant hears about this and kind of like a political struggle in the village starts where People get super rallied up about this surveyor topic, but that like the last word is that no, we don't need a surveyor, and the officials say, okay, you don't need a surveyor. There was a problem with the bureaucracy. We don't need a surveyor. And then K shows up right after they figured out that no, this is not a problem, we don't need a surveyor. K then says, okay, then you don't need me, then I should leave, but give me compensation because this took so long for me to get here and now I have Frida, and honestly I just want to stay here because I want to marry Frida. And I feel like I have been robbed of an opportunity. And then the church warden just says, no, you're not cast out and you don't have to leave immediately, but you have no right to compensation whatsoever. And then the warden just kind of gives up and screams that his leg hurts, and Mitzi comes over and cares for him, and Kay is just fed up with the whole situation and leaves again and takes the assistants with him. The conversation with the warden in this chapter is kind of a continuation of the talk with the hostess one chapter before this. If we had any questions whether the things the hostess said were legit, we now have evidence here with the church warden, who's one step closer to the castle because he's kind of the organizer of the whole village. Kay gets turned down, as always, gets taught about the way things work without learning anything, and he gets neither accepted nor totally declined. We're still in this limbo state that we have been in for the last couple of chapters. The warden, just like everyone else, seems like a simple and prideful person. He says that the castle never makes mistakes, while also telling this super long story about how there was a big mistake in the bureaucracy. But he doesn't say this in a big brother, I'm scared of the castle kind of way, but he really believes what he's saying. Instead of saying there has been a problem or a mistake at the office of the castle, he says there are other offices and compliance offices who will check it inside of the castle, and they have like their own processes, and it's none of my business, but they never make mistakes, because even if there could be a mistake, they have someone looking at that, and by that it's like legitimated again. Kay again feels like he's talking to a wall, but he also realizes that he's dependent on every scrap of influence and information he can get. But when trying to understand the system, his conversational partners usually point towards their experiences in life and their shrewdness, so they get personal. But when he tries to connect with them on a more personal level, they start talking about the intricacies of the castle and about official processes. After returning from the church warden, Kay gets immediately called to the hostess of the Bridge Inn. She feels sick and lies in bed. She tells everyone to leave except for Kay. And then she confesses that she used to be Clum's mistress as well, but 20 years ago. As evidence, she provides a photography of her messenger back in the day who used to bring messages from Clum to her. She also has like a handkerchief, like a piece of cloth that she got from Clum. She also has like a small white hat that she uses when she sleeps. She kind of keeps these things as souvenirs, and she then says that she is scared that Frida will feel the same way in the future when she's older, but she also emphasizes how she's smarter and better than Frida because she got these souvenirs and like actively took them with her because she knew that it was only temporary, and Frida didn't do that because she was prideful. And now she doesn't have anything that connects her to Clum. So it's a very weird mix that she says, oh, poor Frida will have this heartache that I have been having for the last 20 years. But she also says, oh, that dumb bitch Frida didn't manage to stay connected to Clum like I did. There's also this weird dynamic with the husband of the hostess, so the innkeeper. She calls him dumb and simple-minded. Without hate, she just states it as, okay, he's just one of the dumb peasants. She also tells a story about how when they got engaged, that each night in bed they used to talk about how Clam left her and why he didn't call her again and what she did wrong. And she kind of analyzes that with her husband, and she is really emotional and really gets into it, and Clam appears like this god, this angelic figure for her. But the way she says it, it's not that it's just her feelings, but that's just how Clam is. And because I have seen Clam's face and he has touched me, I really know what his true nature is. So Kay, because he's kind of over these conversations, tries to manipulate her and tries to get her to calm her down, because she feels like that is the biggest loss of her life, that she can't be with Clam anymore, and that Kay is kind of the villain because he has reminded her of that. And Kay kind of tries to spin it and say, your entanglement with Clam is the way that your life is as great as it is right now. You have this in and you don't have any debt. You work great and you're the boss. And if you wouldn't have been with Clam, then your social standing would have been worse. Basically, Clam in his own weird way is still caring for you. With her sense of self restored, Kay is a fox and uses the situation to his advantage again and says, hey, because you're closer to Clam than anyone else, you could maybe arrange it in a way that my messages reach him. And she says, yeah, okay, I can try and do that. You understood my love for him, and give me a week and then I'll get you two in contact. And then she jumps out of bed and starts working again, and Kay quickly runs to Frida. Now it gets religious, kind of. We get to see how just minor connections to the castle have a major impact on every aspect of life of people in the village, of peasants. Kay works on his tactical approach and even uses that the hostess underestimates him when it comes to dealings inside of the village. The hostess even forgets how things are supposed to go in the village because she believes Kay when he says Clam still remembers you. Even though she says Clam doesn't remember anybody. The hostess's emotions seem naive but also pure and childlike. But they also appear as not understandable for someone outside of the village. At times, it appears as religious fanaticism. This chapter made me realize, in a way, the life of the villagers is just as hard to understand for the reader as the dealings inside of the castle are for the villagers. So there we have the first 100 pages of Franz Kafka's The Castle. 14 chapters more to go. After taking another look at the book, I understood a little more, but one thing I'm asking myself, it kind of feels like rage bait at points, because he tries to convey this feeling of being powerless and not understanding what you have to do and fighting against these powers that you don't understand, without doing it like in a horror way or like in a thriller way, but more the feeling you have when you have to deal with officials and kind of when you need certain documents or whatever. But my question is that really worth all that, making me read 100 pages and making it feel like I'm reading 500 because it takes forever and because everyone's just annoying? But I also kind of find it endearing in a way that I can read Kafka and I don't like anyone in the whole story. Maybe someone like cooperates for one page and then I feel good about myself, but usually I hate all the characters. But the things that I think about when reading this book or after reading this book is like the soft power of unwritten social rules, the way politics feel so far away but have so immediate consequences for us, how people live their life in a certain way controlled by certain soft powers and then have the feeling that these are strict laws that can't change and that we have no power over. How we use facts that are written down as explanations for the things we do, but usually the main driver are still more pure and animalistic. So we may say, I do this because this is the law, but in reality we do this because we feel superior to others, because we want our emotions to be accepted because we have a certain desire that we want to fulfill. Thank you for listening, and tune in the next time when we talk about the next 100 pages of this book.